Whatever we value will determine what balance looks like in our life and in our families.
Welcome to Mom Mentality, your virtual village of support. I'm Jessica Campbell, your family wellness coach, and I am committed to helping you prioritize your and your family's well-being. This podcast will be like your favorite ladies group chat come to life. We'll share the ups and downs of life for moms just like you, get real advice from coaches and experts, and I'll pop in with my own stories and tips on everyday challenges to the big questions. Whether you're juggling work from home, balancing adult life with parenthood, tackling ADHD, yours or your kids, or just trying to catch a breath, Mom Mentality is your spot. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to just kick it right off by asking if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Jessica. Yes. So my name is Catalina Allen, and I am the owner of a parent education and coaching company titled Intentionally Focused. And so my background is all in education. I have for the longest time been just somebody who's very wired to accomplish and create and kind of test the limits. I've always loved working. And so my background has been that of a reading interventionist for children who were not responding to education in the traditional setting, a public school teacher for all grades K through 5, because I really wanted to have a grasp of the continuum that children go through in elementary school from start to finish, knowing that I wanted to be a school administrator. And so I became a school administrator at quite a young age. I had a staff of about 80 teachers and about 700 students. And it was invigorating work. It's really what I've always loved to do. And so that has kind of been a big journey in my life that sort of led me to where I am now in the realm of educating and focusing on the whole family structure through assisting parents.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I can tell you're very passionate about that work. I could just see your face light up. And I know this is like a podcast, so you won't see it at home, but I can see the excitement when you talk about that. So that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so prior to this, when we did the pre-interview, you had mentioned, having your son and how things changed. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how it essentially shifted how you were viewing like your values for career and home life and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it really flipped my life upside down. So, like I said, I've always been a very career minded person. I always knew really what I wanted and how I thrived in the work setting and how that really fueled me as a person. And so, my career path was really going where I wanted. And simultaneously, I started kind of down this personal growth journey at the same time, which was pretty challenging. And I have always been a firm believer that wherever we invest our time is really a reflection of where our hearts are and what we deeply value. And I came to a point in my career where I had to be really honest with myself and realize that some things were out of balance in my life because in 2021, I was blessed with my miracle baby. And yet I had to kind of examine my time. And I realized that my students, my staff, the community that I was serving, while it fueled me greatly, they were getting my all. And despite how deeply grateful I was for my son and how much I just absolutely adored him, he was kind of getting the leftovers of that time. And in a very kind of challenging way where I was in this career that demanded so much of me, I started to feel like as much as I love this, I don't know that this is sustainable with what I want for my family as well.
Right.
So I kind of recognized this deep need for balance in my life and that things had swung too far in one direction and I kind of needed to course correct. And after a lot of self reflection, I did what I truthfully never, ever in a million years imagined that I would have done. And I left everything. And I walked away from my career to be a stay at home mom. And you have to understand, I was deep, deep in child development understanding at that time. And so I knew that just because of various circumstances, I didn't feel comfortable putting my son in daycare and just kind of how care had lined up. But honestly, it led me into this like identity crisis because I loved working. I was so passionate about what I did, but I knew that I loved my son more. And so I recall telling my husband, and after he kind of realized I wasn't joking, that I was not going back to work, he told me, I give you 6 months. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, I give you 6 months to either write a book or start your own business. And I laughed and I was like, no, this is what I'm gonna do. And he was just kind of like, okay, but I know how your brain works and I know what you love. And so anyway, it really started me down this journey of asking that question, like, can there be balance? Is it possible to do what I love to do, what fuels me, what fills my cup, and at the same time give my son what he deserves in terms of my time and my presence? Is there really enough space or room for the both of us? And so that's really kind of where this whole journey led me. But it, like I said, it flipped my life upside down because I never ever imagined not being in the work setting for any length of time.
Right.
But it really kind of led me to self reflection and a lot of vision work and tearing down what I knew about who I was and what I wanted, and also figuring out what type of mother I wanted to be. It led me to this beautiful parent education and coaching business while having a little one at home. So it's exactly where I needed to be now.
I love that. And I really resonate so much with that. And like, I was not in education. I realize I am very neurospicy and I'm not cut out for the corporate world. I do currently work for a school also, as a para. But when I was a stay-at-home mom with my first, I had that issue of like, I'm home. My kids are my world. My kids are like, they matter the most, but I still felt like I needed something more, like something for me. And that's how I got into like, I did like network marketing and this and that, like trying to get something going to keep me like to have something for myself and that felt I could feel good about besides just being a parent. That gave me a little more structure and a little more, I don't know, adult thought processes. But now I am in that situation where I'm like, okay, but now I'm like launching a business, you know, like getting things off the ground and it's so much time.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see now, I had never worked in education before. I can definitely see how the education is like all consuming because I work with some amazing special education teachers who just, it seems like they work around the clock. Like they just
They
give it
do.
their
They
all. And I'm
do.
like, take a break. And they're like, but we have all this stuff to do. And yeah, so I can see where like that dynamic comes in when you're really passionate about something. And I see that now with my business where I have to purposefully like turn it off and say, okay, I'm going to intentionally take this night off or whatever, especially in launch mode, you know, like there's just so many things, so many balls in the air at the same time that like I can disappear into my office and not come out for like 3 days, but I
Yeah.
have to be very intentional about that. And I think it's interesting because it's not a conversation that a lot of people have. Most people are like, I don't want to work, you know, like, so it's not a conversation a lot of people are having when you love what you're doing but you also want to have that balance and be able to be there for your children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work with a lot of different parents on a day to day basis. But one of the groups I would say that I absolutely love working with the most are specifically moms who love what they do, who are passionate about the work that they feel wired to do and feel really fulfilled because that isn't everyone, right? Unfortunately, we face a lot of different circumstances, whether financial or just circumstantial, where people have to work outside the home and it's not necessarily their first choice. And
Right.
yet, I think it requires kind of a different skill set when you are passionate about what you do. You do want to go to work, but you also don't want to miss out on anything with
Right.
your children, right? And so
Right.
that balance, I think, looks really different. And it's one of the most beautiful things to get to work with families to help them build that intentionality into their life.
Right. Right. Thinking about that like personality type, that kind of achiever personality, how did you find that balance or how did you kind of reconcile that like love for your career and then also having that evolving family dynamic?
So I think it came down to how I defined, I'm sorry, how I defined a successful balance. And what I mean by that is I think sometimes we look at balance as trying to do everything perfectly, and
Mm,
that's just not a reality. And so when you have this achiever mentality, or I would say when you're very passionate about work that's outside of your home, I think it comes down to having a more holistic definition of what having successful balance really looks like. Because I think personally, it's not a constant state of balance. It is more so something that kind of ebbs and flows during different seasons of our parenthood. So I can explain that a little bit more if
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually a question I was going to ask, if you thought it was more like, if it was more something that had flexibility in it, or if it was something that you try to keep still.
Sure. So I think it really begins with identifying and knowing your personal values. And so this is one of the very first exercises I do with any family that I work with, because whatever we value will determine what balance looks like in our life and in our families. And so what I mean by that is, if you are a mom who deeply values productivity, which a lot of women in my shoes do, right? Then
Mhm.
how you define balance in your career slash home life is going to vary greatly, say from someone who deeply values cooperation or curiosity, right? And so we go through a kind of this workshop environment where clients and I sit down together and we really examine, like, not just an idea of, oh, those things are nice to have in theory, but like, what is really of the highest priority to you as an individual, as a person? What do you want to see in your home? And so once we present those values, I really encourage parents to set like three. You don't need more than three. You need to have a clear focus. And then we check in if they have a partner, obviously, for their partner to do the same, anyone who's co parenting, so that you can come together and select what is of the most important to your family. And so you might have something that's really important to you as an individual, but it doesn't necessarily mean you want to instill that. You might still model it, right, for your children. But whatever you decide as your family values is what's going to be really at the core of how you make decisions to find balance in your life. So this kind of starts to provide a filter for all of the decisions that you make in your family. And that's really what's going to define balance. And so the way that I look at that is, once you know what you value, you can check, how do you spend your time? How do you spend your finances? And how do you spend your energy? Because
Mm.
really, if you think about it, how those three things are being stewarded, if they're being stewarded well, are a reflection of how you're going to do if you're quote unquote successful in both your parenthood and in your career life. And when we don't have that clarity, there's really no, you're not going to have balance. There's no such thing as balance. But when we're clear on what we value, what's most important to us, then that balance is really going to look different in different seasons. But we know what we're focusing on, right? We know what matters the most to us. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Can you give like an example of that? Like you said, how
Yeah.
you spend your time, money, can you give like an example of
Yeah,
something?
absolutely. So time, I always think about that: time, money, and energy, right? So for example, if there is currently a work project that is requiring really long hours, more so than usual, right? But if my values are clear, and again, these are going to be different. There's no right or wrong set of
Right.
values per family, right? But if I am clear on my values, and say one of my highest values as a family is peace, we usually partner those together. If
Mhm.
one of my highest values is calm and peace, then I can ask myself, as I'm spending all of this extra time at work, even though it's busy, even though the time is demanding, is it still in congruence with my value of calm and peace? If it's not, if it's stressing me out, if I'm constantly tense, if people around me feel like they have to walk on eggshells because I'm so stressed out, I'm just going to bite your head off any minute,
Right.
then
Right.
things are out of alignment, right? And I have to do a personal inventory at that point and ask those hard questions. Hey, is this project actually worthy of my time? Why am I taking it on? What is my motivation? And maybe it requires me to step back, and that's how I find balance. But the opposite is also true. We have to ask those questions in the home setting as well, not just in work. So I
Mhm.
might be in a season where I do have a little bit more time. I have more, if you want to call it downtime, which I don't view it that way, intentional time to be at home with my kids. But is it time that I'm actually devoting to them in a quality manner? Is it fueling, say, if that value is calm and peace, is it fueling that sense of calm and peace within the family structure? Or is everybody chaotic? Are we home together, but everyone's having a meltdown every 10 minutes? If that's the case, then I also have to reevaluate, right? Like, what is out of
Right.
alignment? Am I
Right.
at home, but I'm not actually there? Am I scrolling social media every 5 minutes? am I home, but I'm still constantly checking my work email because my mind is elsewhere. So
Right.
it's all about being actually present where you're at. So I think that that's really how I define that balance, is that constant reevaluating depending on the season, depending on the age and the needs of the kids, because obviously as your kids get older, they're going to be able to verbalize a little bit better what they need and what they value. But I think to have that successful balance, it's more about having clarity as to what values you hold near and dear and how they're being reflected in that season of parenthood and in your career, checking time, money, energy. I think that's
Mm.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That was a great explanation. Yes, thank you for that. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking like my first thought was like when you said how you're spending your money, and I think of people eating out, right? But
Yeah.
then like sometimes that's necessary. Like for us, we have to have one night a week where we eat out because we have a really long dance night. And like I can't, that's like the one place I can't get my kids in the same class. And so we're like, okay, so those nights we know we're either getting takeout or we're, doing a pizza or whatever. And so just seeing like, thinking of it in terms of that, like because we're valuing the time that our kids get into these like extracurriculars. My kids are homeschooled. So, a lot of people are like, oh, you're just gonna run ragged or they're on the go. How do kids do 4 nights a week? And I'm like, for my kids, it's not like a public school kid because they're not at school all day and then going to activities every single night. For my kids, they're like living their best life all day while I'm working and
Sure.
just, kind of have a free for all. And then we have to do our homeschooling and our, dance, jujitsu, gymnastics outside of those hours. And so for them, like that's fun and it's not exhausting for them. So for us to make that simpler, we spend our money on, takeout night just to make things go smoother. And so that was the thought that had popped into my head when you had said that, like, where are you spending your time? Because I'm like, I don't want to be eating out and spending money on takeout.
Sure.
However,
Yeah.
what's the value?
And I think that that's a great example because somebody might might have the same value as you and your family, right? So maybe that value, and I don't know, obviously would require going a little bit deeper into that conversation, but maybe it's a value of time or presence with your children, right?
Right.
Whatever that value that you're holding near is, you're finding a way to make that value a priority through saying, hey, you know what? We're gonna trim the fat here today. We're not cooking at home. We're getting
Right.
takeout because it's easier and allows us to do what we value. Where another family might have that same value of maybe it's connectedness or special time together. And their approach to that will look completely different. And they'll say, hey, on Friday nights, we all come home together and we cook a big meal together, right?
Right.
You might have completely opposite ways of demonstrating that value, but yet at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong decision because you've identified what is of value to your family.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like, especially being around like a homeschool conversation is, there's a lot of like, but if you're working, how do you have time for that? And it's, we find ways to like do those things just on a different, it's like on a different schedule, like where some parents give their kids like that free time where they're not really doing anything. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing in the evenings when everyone's, like after dinner and everyone's like, just go do your thing. Like my kids get that during the day. And then in the evenings, we all like, they don't let me leave. So I have to sit and dance and watch. I have to sit in jujitsu and watch. And
Yeah.
actually on Mondays, we do gymnastics, but it's mommy and me gymnastics for me and the littlest. So, like those are things that are still like, and then like homeschooling, it all brings our family together. So for us, that is the dynamic that works. And we're pretty much around each other all the time anyway. Like they never leave. It's just like, yeah, it's interesting to see, like you said, there is no right or wrong answer. And it's just kind of what works for your family and what you value. So it's just an interesting to have that different perspective too, especially because my dynamic is different because I work from home and I homeschool. Like a lot of times people are like, okay, I work from home, but I take my kids to school or to daycare or whatever. So it is a different look for my family. Can you share a little bit more about the process of taking an inventory of your time as far as like when you want to find more of that balance, like how do you, I know you like you're looking at your values, but how do you really take an inventory of where you need to spend that time in alignment with your values?
That is
Or like
such a
what,
good question.
yeah, like, or what if there seems to be that like roadblock of like, I don't know where
Yeah.
to go with that?
Yeah, so we get really practical. And a lot of my clients will tell you I'm kind of ruthless when it comes to holding up that mirror because the reality is life gets away from us. And
Mhm.
until we really are willing to slow down and pause and say, okay, let's talk honestly about how I'm spending my time, my finances, and my energy. We can just let days and weeks and months and years pass us by. And then we look back and say, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Right? That's how all of these things happen, whether it's debt or, we're stuck in a job that we hate for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. And so my whole business is really about bringing intentionality into the home. And so that question, I think, is so powerful of how do we take inventory of our time? So I will often ask clients to reflect back on the last 30 days and really look, and we do this for money as well.
Mhm.
But in terms of time, really kind of write down what they think they're spending their time on,
Right.
right? So obviously the bulk of it is going to be work. And then I have them get a little bit more specific when it comes to home stuff like doing bedtime, bath, and taking the kids to an activity, whatever that might be. And then we really kind of reflect back. And so I ask them to bring their calendar with them. And so we look at our calendars like, okay, is what I think I'm spending my time on actually what I'm spending my time on? And the reality is, most of the time, we think we're doing X amount of things, and it's often more so in our mind than it is in reality what we're doing for certain things. And then for other things, we completely downplay it. So our mind kind of has this very powerful effect of playing tricks on us to make us think certain things. And the reality is, sometimes we think, oh my goodness, we are just, we're killing it when we're home. And if we really were to take that inventory, really reflect, like if I had you sit down and map out your last 7 days, even, and how was that home time spent, how much of that would be watching TV or your phone was in your hand,
Yeah.
right? Versus actual connectedness, uninterrupted FaceTime with your child. And those
Yeah.
are questions that we don't like. They make us really uncomfortable. They even make me uncomfortable. And I
Right.
do this to myself almost daily, right? Because sometimes you get to the end of the day, and granted, we talk a lot in our sessions about, even within that, finding balance. It does not mean that every second that you are at home with your kids, you have to be staring at them in the face and,
Right.
oh, honey, what do you need? Right? We are human beings. We are
Right.
perfect. And it's not about that. But it is about being realistic. If these are the things that I value, or I say that I value, but now I've taken inventory of my last, say it's not even 30 days, say it's 2 weeks, and it doesn't really align, then we have to ask that hard question of like, are these three things really my values, or do I want them to? Is that an
Right.
idealistic view because maybe my parents parented that way, or because this is what I think society is telling me I should do? But those aren't really the things that I value. And sometimes that's the reality of what happens. And then we get real about like, okay, so what does actually matter to you? Because you're not going to live at peace within yourself if you're saying you value one thing and you're not living. The most of
Right.
the stress that arises in parenthood comes out of this being out of alignment, our actions not being in congruence with what we say is of value to us. And then sometimes we do these types of exercises, whether it's finances or time, and parents will tell me, no, Catalina, and they'll be in tears. Catalina, no, these are really the things that I value. And now, as I'm looking at my day kind of mapped out in front of me, this is not good. This is not where I want my life to go. And so that's how we move forward of like, okay, now it takes some intentionality and some steps forward to kind of course correct. And it's absolutely doable.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's so true. Cause I actually had done an exercise like that with my husband, and it was a really hard conversation for him to say, I value faith, and then me to say, but you haven't spent time like doing devotionals. You haven't spent time, like in prayer and now we do, every night as a family we do our prayer and we say what we're grateful for, and we've built in some of that intentionality. But that was a hard conversation because I'm like, do you want to value it, or do you actually value it enough to sit
Exactly.
down every day and spend time doing the things that you should be doing, to grow and mature in your faith. And so that was kind of, I think, it was definitely eye-opening
Yeah.
for both of us, because I had been the same way, but I didn't put down, like, I know faith is a big part of my life, but like I didn't put it down as my core value because I felt like if I wasn't in the place to sit down and spend time with God, then it clearly wasn't a core value. Then when I started working on my own process with that, I was like, okay, but what are the things that I'm doing? How often is that in my mind? And then I was like, okay, I can confidently say it is a core value because it's always in my mind as I'm going through my day to day, like, but prior to that, I was like, we go to church on Sundays. Ooh, is that actually a value? Or
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no, I think it's really important, and that is really kind of at the essence of what I do with families, because I would say most people say that one of their core values is parenting, right? Parenthood or family life, etc. But the reality is that sometimes our time and our energy and our resources don't really reflect that. And so that can be really daunting to sit down and kind of have that reality check. And yet at the same time, it's also very freeing, because you don't have to live saying you value something that you don't, right? You
right,
get to decide what's of value to you. There's not really a right or wrong value. And yet, most of the people that I have the opportunity to interact with, once we kind of tear down like what is actually happening and kind of get behind that, their goals, their family values are really, they are attainable, they are
right,
doable. And so it just takes some level of intentionality. And a lot of the women that I work with who are passionate like this in their careers, they know what those values are in the career setting. They know exactly where they're going, what they want,
right,
and how they're going to get there. And so I love getting to help people with this kind of mindset transform that. Hey, that doesn't have to just be you and your work brain. You can bring that level of intentionality into the home as well. And I think that's when people kind of like me who love to work, we thrive in that because it becomes more attainable rather than just like, oh, I'm home, I should enjoy
right.
every second of being home.
Right. And it's like, that makes me think of what you had said earlier of like, you don't have to be staring at your kid all the time. Sometimes it's good for them to also be on their own. So it really isn't. It's not like you have to, cater to your child's every move, but in the times that you choose to be there, be there. Like you could say, oh, we're having a family movie night, and then you spend your whole time like on the phone. That's not really having a family movie night. That's not really like, if I do a family movie night, I'm like making popcorn. We have like a little movie like thing that says like what the movie is. We get the little like candy buckets and we make it like a movie theater. Like we try to make it a fun little experience as a family, and we try to like do it together. So it can be something as simple as watching a movie together, but we still try to make it more connected and do the thing together rather than just saying, oh, well, we threw the movie on, but I don't want to watch it, so I'm going to play on my phone over here. The kids want you to watch what they're interested in. So even something as simple as that can still be more connected when you sit back and really think about how you're going about that process.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
going into you starting your business, what did that look like when you did decide to be a stay-at-home mom for that time, and then you decided to start your business? What was that journey like?
Hard. It's really hard. I had a lot of days of thinking, what am I doing? I had a little one at home, and I think my son was maybe about 9 months old or something. And I was still just like, what am I even, who am I? What am I doing? What, I'm insane. So yeah, it was hard. But it was a challenge. And I think because of how my brain works and how I'm wired, I kind of get a sick joy of doing hard things. One of my son's favorite lines, he's 3.5 now, and he says that all the time. Mom, I can do hard things, and so can you. And
Oh,
and I think that's just kind of the essence of who I am. And so it did require A lot of intentionality in terms of time, right? How was I going to devote the necessary time to the classes that I was taking to get my certification, to really understand the business world? And that continues to evolve, obviously. And now as I have clients, it requires that separation of, hey, during this time I'm not a stay-at-home mom. It's
Right.
funny, I kind of get the very unique role of getting to be in both worlds now, where before obviously was my career and then there was my family, and now I feel in many ways that I am a stay-at-home mom. So my day-to-day, I am the primary caretaker.
Right.
I'm with my son. I don't need to find outside childcare,
Hmm.
and yet at the same time I do run my business. And so it's really unique. It's works well for our family, but it requires all of these things that I'm discussing with you to be at the forefront of my mind constantly. And it did from the get-go, because I knew, knowing myself, knowing my personality, that I can dive really deep into anything that I'm passionate about, and I didn't want to find myself out of balance by compromising on the values that I had in terms of my family. I didn't want that to be at the expense of, hey, I'm launching this new business and I want to see this be successful, right? I'm kind of that person that anything I do, I want to do it to excellence. I take a lot of pride in the work that I do, and that includes how I parent. And so it's just been a lot of little baby steps to get to where I am, being very, very mindful of those things that I mentioned to you: my time, my finances, and my energy.
Do you have any systems that you can specifically think of that you've put in place that someone might consider or benefit from if they are kind of in a similar place?
Yeah, so I'm a very, very efficient person, and I could tell you, all of these things in terms of having a planner, having a schedule, building your routines, and all of those things are great. And I have all of those, right? But I would say that my best tip for anybody trying to optimize their time and their energy is to kind of do the deep work, to do the heavier lifting first, because I really try to focus with parents on the root of behavior and not just the symptoms of it. So if you're feeling like you're burnt out on time, or you have these ambitions and you want to succeed in, as we were talking, making a podcast or whatever it might be, like any
Right.
kind of endeavor, I think it begins with your mindset and that personal reflection journey before we can really talk about effectiveness and efficiency with tools and tips and strategies. I mean, there's a million, right? A million books on how to be productive, a million apps that you can use to track your to-do list. But the reality is that I think sometimes the most effective work is the slowest work. And that's the personal, the really deep, reflective, recognizing, for example, recognizing and accepting that you are just one person, right? You
Right.
have limited time, you have limited energy, you have limited resources. And I think, especially as moms who are ambitious outside of the work, outside of the home, and within the home life, we want to do it all at
Yeah.
100%. And truthfully, that is a recipe for burnout, and particularly, I would say, a recipe for resentment, both in the workplace and what we often don't talk about is with our children. That is a very, very real thing that I see with a lot of working moms. And so I think my biggest tip would be that slowing down, that deep personal reflective work first, to
Right.
recognize, like, hey, I'm limited. This is my capacity, so that we're not trying to do more than we're really capable of in the first place.
Yeah. Man, yeah, resentment. That's like it's like it drops this heavy thing on your chest. Like, oh, that it's so real. And I think it's something we're definitely afraid to say when it
Yes.
comes up, and as we know, especially as coaches, anything that you feel like you can't say out loud is just you're gonna stew on and it's just gonna get bigger. And so
Yeah, it's going to have power over you. And one of the things that I see over and over again is moms, parents, I would say, because my work is primarily with moms, but is also with fathers. But it is this idea that parenting comes easier to other people, or comes more naturally to some other people. And I think for those of us with very goal oriented mentalities, I want to just encourage parents that motherhood is a skill. that can be developed over time. The more clarity you have on what you want, who you want to be as a parent, the easier it's going to be to achieve that, just like you would at work. Hey, I know that I want to go for this promotion. These are the steps that I need to do. This is the next project. This is who I'm going to hire, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves the grace to look at parenthood as a skill. We almost look at it as like, oh, that should just be a given. I should know how to be this amazing parent all the time.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's where resentment comes in, because what we think we should be able to do, we're so successful at work, and we come home and we don't feel that same kind of joy, that
Right.
same kind of fulfillment, that same kind of ease, I would say.
Mhm.
And so then we start to become bitter of like, what, either what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with my kids, or what's wrong with my family. But we don't say any of that stuff, right? We stew on it because we're afraid that we're the only ones that feel that way. So anyway, I think that for anyone trying to really optimize how they parent and how they balance work, it comes down to having that clarity. And realistically, sometimes this does require the assistance of somebody that's outside of the day-to-day chaos that is parenting,
Yeah.
because we can provide that unbiased perspective, and that really can help you bring those things into fruition into your family.
Yeah, yeah, like a neutral party. So there's this thing that my pastor says that I actually love because it seems like it's been very in alignment with all of the mindset work that I've personally done and all the healing I've done and all the things and the tools and strategies that I've implemented. And he says, what gets your mind, gets your heart, what gets your heart, gets your soul, what gets your soul, gets your body. And it's so true because it's like the more for example, think on your values, that's going to like filter through into how you're behaving. And it's the same way with like the resentment. If you're sitting and thinking on that resentment, eventually it's going to get to your heart. It's going to filter down until you're behaving in a way that's very resentful towards your family. And I've just always loved that because I'm like, it is so true how it just like trickles down, through how you show up in the world, what you're keeping
Yeah.
in your mind. And so with that, I wanted to kind of segue into this question of when you're working with parents who maybe are, very ambitious, but they still feel like they're kind of a victim of their circumstance. Like maybe they feel like they're stuck in what they're doing and they don't feel like they have the flexibility to make it look exactly how they want. How do you work on that with them? Or I guess what would you tell them to work on, or what direction could you,
Yeah.
push them into?
So I think before I answer that,
Mhm.
going back to what you mentioned, kind of that domino effect that your pastor mentioned,
Yeah,
I think the reversal, I guess, or the positive of that would also be equally true. So for
right,
example, when I have a family that we're working with, they gain clarity as to who they are and what they value, and then we start to move that into the family perspective. It becomes so much easier because they now have a filter through which all of their decisions of time, energy, money, et cetera, are built around. So, for example, if they come to the conclusion that one of their family values is, I don't know, let's say generosity, I'm
right,
just choosing something, right? They can then start to ask these questions. Does this activity, hey, we got invited to whatever birthday party, or we got invited to this work event, or we got invited to whatever it might be, right? Does this activity move us closer as a family to be a family who gets to demonstrate generosity, if that's your value? No, then we don't do it. When we recognize we are one person and we can try to optimize our time, our energy, etc., we really have to look at that like, hey, who am I? I know who I am. I know what direction I want to lead my family. And then we just ruthlessly eliminate the things that are not congruent with that. And I tell parents all the time, like, don't feel bad about that. Be
yeah,
confident in that, even if it doesn't make sense to other people, because I think that's where we start to eliminate so much stress in our lives. So, with that said, I think the nudge that I would give parents who are maybe finding themselves stuck in this, hey, I'm not as intentional as I want to be with my family, or we're not necessarily moving in the direction that we want to be. First, I would say that you're not alone. I think whether it's a stay at home mom situation or working outside the home mom situation, honestly, every mother that I talk to feels some level of isolation or lack of support or lack of tools to move their family forward in some capacity. Obviously, some of us more so than others. But I think recognizing that nobody's got it perfect, nobody is doing this perfectly, can even just that knowledge can help parents breathe a little bit and be like, okay, I'm not a failure. I'm not failing, because there's a lot of internal dialogue that goes on behind the scenes about who we are and what kind of mom we are and are we doing enough. And realistically, once we have that perspective of like, hey, this is where I want to go, but I feel stuck and I don't know how to get there, sometimes just knowing, hey, other people are stuck and there's been other people that have gone before me that have made progress, can be really, really beneficial. Because honestly, we live in this society where everyone puts their best face forward, and
Mm.
it's really damaging to everybody, but I would say it's particularly damaging for women with careers, because there's this image that everything is great at work and I'm, boss babe kind of mentality, and everything is wonderful at home because, I have this amazing family. But let's be real, that's just not true. You might love going to work, but it's stressing the hell out of you, and that's okay, right? And you adore your kids, but you just want them to go to bed because you're maxed out and you don't want someone else to say mom one more time. All of that is okay. And I think we have to talk about that. So, my best advice is honestly to be honest about the joy and the hardship that comes with both your career and your home life. That's going to go a long way into drawing you closer to other parents who are honest and true and vulnerable into your circle, and that will help you as a parent feel a little bit less alone in that. And honestly, I say this to parents all the time, like the people who judge you for your sincerity when you say that work sucks or that, you know you're tired of changing diapers, they're not your people anyway. So
Right.
it's okay, just say it
Yes.
anyway.
I love that. I'm always saying that. Well, maybe they're not your people. That's probably true. And I have, so I tend to have a bit of a potty mouth, but like my biggest thing is I'm always saying, no, it's a total shit show. And like,
Yeah.
I'm like, but I say that with like the most amount of love. Like, I've got 3 kids. Of course, it's a shit show from time to
Yeah.
time. Like, we are all different human beings. We have a lot of neurodiversity in my house, like I'm working from home, like we've got a million things, we've got a giant puppy. It's just like, of course it is, but I say that with like all the love in my heart, because like back in the day when I would say I wanted to be a mom, I would say my kids are going to drive me crazy, but in the best way. And
Mhm.
that's how I view it when I say it's a shit show. I'm like, I wouldn't want any other shit show. This is the one that I
This is the one
love.
I
Like,
chose.
it's just blissfully insane and it's okay.
And it's valuable to say that, right? Because
Right.
when we don't, we make it seem like the only thing that we're focusing on is the bliss. And that
Right.
makes other people who are not in a state of joyfulness in parenthood feel really alone, feel very isolated, and feel like it's them who's the problem. When the
Mhm.
reality is, there is not a single parent I have ever spoken to, if they were real with me, whether it's as a client or as a friend or just as a human being, that are not wanting to rip out their hair some days
Right.
because they're just over it. And it's like, I just want to go on vacation and have a drink and have a difficult conversation and just be done, especially in those younger years, right? Where the physicality of our children is so demanding of our full presence and our body, and right, not and not
Mhm.
not necessarily, there isn't that level of independence or maturity yet. Yeah, I
Right.
think it's really important to talk about the mess and the struggle that comes with that. But you know what? Also, practically, I would say, especially for kind of high power women, women who are really driven and passionate in their work, I would say the second tip, outside of really being honest about the mess and the hard, is also to receive additional support in parenting, just like they would in any other area of their life.
Mhm.
For example, if you had a health goal that you really wanted to meet, there would be no judgment or shame in hiring a personal trainer. Or if you had mental health challenges that you needed to kind of work through, finding a therapist, right? I think there's very much a stigma that comes with parenthood that, no, I have to be able to handle it all on my own. And the reality is that that's just not true. Why would it be, right? our kids deserve the best version of us, which is absolutely within reach when we have the necessary tools to equip us. But sometimes we can't do that on our own. And so I would say that with that honesty about the struggles, the good and the bad, reaching out for support, because a trained parent educator or coach can really help to bring that level of intentionality into and making that space for a parent, right, to actually be seen, to be heard as both, hey, I am this successful career person and this woman who has high drive and ambition, and at the same time I'm juggling all of the same worries, all of the same fears and insecurities and shit show, for lack of better word, than everybody else is. Just because I'm successful in one area doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to be successful in the other, right? So I think those would be my two biggest pieces of advice for anybody feeling isolated or unsupported. Be transparent about your experience and seek intentional support, because if not, exactly like you said, we do become victims to our situation. And yet when we have that very goal oriented mentality, parenthood can feel a little bit of like chaos if we don't know the roadmap, right?
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah, I've always been the kind of person that's almost like transparent to a fault. And I think
Mm,
because like when I was young, I had like a really rough upbringing. And I was always trying to portray that things were great. But then at the same time, as it's like I hit this phase of my life where I was like, I don't want people to think it's so perfect because other people might be going through that too. And almost like I didn't feel like anyone else was going through the same things I was going through. And so then like when I started noticing that, it's like this shift happened where I started just telling everybody, like just whatever. Like even something as simple as someone like botched my hair so bad when I was in beauty school when I was younger and I started wearing wigs. And people would like, come up to me and be like, "Oh, your hair is so beautiful." And I'm like, "Thanks, it's a wig. Like it's totally fake. Don't look at this and think it's achievable because it's not." Or like for a while I thought I was going to parent coach and I kind of came into this space of like parent and family coaching now because I want to provide like a more holistic approach to family because I just feel like society in general has done a disservice to family, but that's neither here nor there. So
that's the next episode, right?
like people would tell me, like, "Oh, your relationship looks so good," or "You guys just seem so perfect," or this or that. And my husband and I now have been together for 15 years and we got together when I was like 18, right out of high school into college we met. And like I've always been like very quick to be like, absolutely not. We work very hard. We bicker like crazy. Like, yeah, we don't have big explosive fights often. We do, but like not often. But like we work very hard. And like I don't want anyone to look at our social media or whatever and think that it's this unachievable dream of having a good marriage, because the reality is we still struggle. We still get off. Parenting is one of our biggest hurdles. And even with me being a coach now, like he hasn't actually been coached and I haven't like directly coached him, even though I keep telling him I want to. So there's still some things there where like I immediately want to be like, "You're doing it wrong." Right. And then we get like into our little tiffs and we bicker. It's still very real. Just because I'm a parent coach doesn't mean I have it perfect. And just because my marriage looks great doesn't mean it's perfect. And more people need to be talking about it, because even though logically we think like we know other people must be going through the same things, not hearing it makes like our mind trick us into thinking that it's not happening. And so I think it's just something that 100% needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and that really was kind of my main motivation when I heard this opportunity for the podcast, is really helping women who feel fulfilled through their careers to know that they're not alone in that, and that there's a lot of other women who are juggling that piece of themselves along with parenthood. And so my hope is that, sharing my experience as both a mother and an educator and career person, that can kind of help resonate with that internal struggle that many women have in terms of that guilt, that frustration, that lostness that we sometimes feel as we navigate both of those really difficult worlds.
Right. Well, I know we're getting close to wrapping up, but I do have a couple more questions. One is, what do you find to be the most rewarding since you made that change for yourself?
Okay, I think kind of twofold. I think the most rewarding from making that shift was one, it released me of a lot of fear. I didn't realize how much I had wrapped myself in this idea of who I was based on what I was accomplishing. And while I don't think I would have ever verbalized that, I just had such a career. This is what I want, and this is what I'm working for, and this is where I'm going next, and and it served me really well, and I was fulfilled by it. But I once I kind of deconstructed all of that by walking away from all of it, I recognized that there was a lot of fear of like, okay, who am I if I'm not attaining those things? Who am I if I don't accomplish the next promotion or the next, whatever it was that I was looking at? And so I think that walking away in many ways just really kind of unleashed all of that and gave me an opportunity to examine where those fears were coming from, where they stemmed from, and move forward into my next business endeavors with a lot more harmony, I think, within myself and not out of trying to whatever that might have been, right? In terms of trying to attain something at the cost of something else. I think it really helped me to look at that and say, no, I want these things. I am ambitious, but it's because I love it and it's because it fills me with joy, not because I'm trying to fill X, Y, or Z. And
Right.
so I think it released me of a lot of fear and just kind of personal mess that I didn't know was there. And then I think the more practical thing that has been so rewarding is that getting to do life with my son in the capacity that I do now is something honestly I could have never dreamed of. I look at his life now and I am so grateful for all of the career decisions that I made and how they led me to truly understanding child development and what he needed in terms of presence and how crucial that early childhood development really is and gifting him my time of really being able to be present and help him through emotionally regulating and teaching him in ways that I didn't experience, right? And so I think making this huge career shift gave me that gift of the kind of parent that I wanted to be that honestly I would not have been able to do if I had continued down the career path that I was on, simply because there's just not enough bandwidth, right? You can't be home all the time and
Right.
also lead a school all the time. It's just not
Right.
realistic. So and I think about that for him too, just the way that he's growing up, what he is seeing as in terms of a parents, but
Right.
in terms of his relationship with me, of somebody who's at home with him and present and able to just really understand and be in tune with his needs. I think about that and sometimes I'm honestly in awe of how much I would have missed out, and the life that we're getting to live together is something that I truly could not be more grateful for.
That's so great. I love that. I love that. Do you ever, this is the like devil's advocate kind of thing, do you ever miss being in the school
All the time.
all the time?
Well, maybe not all the time, but I will tell you I miss it a whole lot on the days that parenthood is real hard. When the tantrum has been going on for half an hour, or when I hear no for the 700th time in the day, or when, you've changed only, 50 poopy diapers or in the whatever it is. Like when it's I think when it's really hard, when I have those days or those weeks, those seasons in parenthood that it's really hard, the career me kind of comes out in a different way where I'm like, I wish I was just in my office and I could close my door or I was just, giving this big presentation to my staff or whatever it might be, because working outside of the home provides a different outlet that's very difficult to attain when you're with your child all day. It requires a different part of your brain. It requires a different level of commitment of yourself when you are fully present with your children all the time. And
Right.
so, yes, I do miss it. I would say I miss it more on the harder days. Like I told you, I never, ever imagined myself being a stay at home mom. And the reason for that is because I would always say, that's the hardest job in the world and I never want it. And I fully meant that. I always looked at stay-at-home moms of like, oh my goodness, I just could never do it because it requires such a sacrifice of you, of all of your emotional regulation, of knowing what your kids need all the time, and that physical and mental and emotional demand on you constantly. That felt draining to me, where work felt like it was fueling me, filling my cup, right? And so I always said, I never want that. And so here I am. So, yes, there are days I miss it, but I think that because of the work that I'm doing, is so impactful in the lives of so many other families. And I get to see teaching and instruction and all of these things, all of these skill sets that I used in the school setting now being worked on in individual families. I don't miss it to the degree where I think I would go back. I wouldn't change it, right? I still get that deep satisfaction, just in a very different way that I didn't even know was possible before.
So, wrapping this up, if you could, because we talked about a lot of stuff, if you
Yes.
could give one main point of advice that if somebody is listening and they just take away one thing, what piece of advice would you give them?
I'm talking to the mom who is balancing both.
Yes.
My one piece of advice to a mom who loves what they do and wants to have peace in terms of giving their children the very best, is to know that when you are living in balance, when you find balance based on your personal values and your family values, and when you have that clarity, you're giving your children a really beautiful gift of getting to see you live out your passions that they wouldn't see otherwise. And so I hope that that can alleviate some of the mom guilt that's really prevalent, and kind of free you to enjoy working, enjoy what you're passionate about, enjoy it, and you're gifting them getting to see what balance can look like in their life as well.
Yes, that's beautiful. Yes, you have permission to love what you do.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. This has been such a good conversation. I've had a blast with this. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
No,
being a
thank you
part of
so
it.
much, Jessica. I really appreciate it. It's been just an honor for me as well. So thank you.
And real quick, before I let you go, where can people find you?
My website is getintentionallyfocused.com. You can go to my website, send me an email anytime.
Remember, you are powerful, you are worthy, you are valued, and you are loved. Keep pushing, keep loving, and most importantly, keep believing in your amazing ability to empower your legacy.